Make sure y'all stay on point with
The Puncher's Point. What is good, y'all? Welcome back to The Puncher's Point. We got the WBA and the IBF champion, Jaron Boots Ennis, in a dominant victory over Eimantas Stanionis. Jaron Boots Ennis defeats Stanionis in the sixth round. Actually, as a matter of fact, not only was it by TKO, but Stanionis' corner waved it off. They were like, we don't want no more of this beating. And Jaron Boots Ennis is now the IBF and the WBA welterweight champion, along with the Ring Magazine champion. So now, overall, we're gonna get into the breakdown of this fight. We're gonna get to the grades, all that good stuff, and then at the end, we're gonna talk about what's next for Jaron Boots Ennis, in my opinion. However, let me just say this. Jaron Boots Ennis, there's been a lot of criticism. I mean, there was the Chukajan fight, there was the Avanesian fight. Not many people were messing with Jaron Boots Ennis, but you know what? Jaron Boots Ennis, he came in here and he made a statement, and that's what we wanted to see. We wanted to see him make a statement, and everybody was talking about how his resume was kind of weak and soft. And I'm not gonna lie, they had a point. I mean, the only champion on his resume before this was Sergey Lipnis, who he also dominated. So when we look at this fight, this is a great fight for Jaron Boots Ennis because Jaron Boots Ennis defeated not only another world champion, not only another undefeated fighter, but he went in there and he gave Stanionis a beating. And I do also want to say it wasn't Stanionis, he seemed a little bit, there were times where he seemed a little bit cautious. So overall, that had something to do with it. He wasn't throwing the same amount of punches that he usually throws. He wasn't going to the body as much. And overall, it just seemed like Stanionis was a lot more cautious and he was basically trying to fend for himself. But there were moments where Stanionis tried to give it a fight, and I do respect that of him. Obviously, Stanionis, they talked about him having a baby pretty soon, a few more days. I do wish him and his family nothing but blessings, you know. As far as Stanionis, he's got to keep his head up. But with all that being said, let's get straight into the scoring. We're going to start off with the game plan. We're going to start off with strategy. As far as strategy, I will say this. Jaron Boots Ennis came in there with a great strategy. He used that jab very, very effectively. That was one of the tools I had for Jaron Boots Ennis was to use that jab. I said it. That jab sets up everything. Whatever combo Jaron Boots Ennis wanted to throw, that jab had to set up everything. So he did use his jab very, very well. He was good with the level changing and the right straight, and he was very versatile as well. There were so many things that he was doing well. The hooks were landing, the uppercuts were landing, the counters were landing. Counter was another big key that I had. Jaron Boots Ennis, he went into that ring and he made it his fight. There wasn't many moments where Stanionis could say he was controlling the fight. Now I'm not gonna lie. From rounds 1 to 3, it looked like Stanionis was getting a little bit better and better and better by the round. See, round 1 it was Boots' round. Round 2, Stanionis kind of picked up a little bit, but it was still Boots' round. Round 3 was a big toss-up round, in my opinion. You know, you could have gave that to either one. And overall, I feel like Boots did just enough in round 3 to take it. Then round 4, he dominated. Round 5, he ended up Jaron Boots Ennis ended up controlling. There were some moments there in round 5, but regardless, that was still Boots' round. And then round 6 was when the knockdown happened. Now the knockdown happened when Jaron Boots Ennis landed a right hook, and then he ended up landing 3 uppercuts to Stanionis after hurting him in after hurting him in the body. See, overall, what I really liked about Boots Ennis was the other key I had for both of them was they both needed to target the body. And I was wrong because I thought Stanionis was going to target the body a lot more. You see, Stanionis, I held him to a very high regard. I thought that Stanionis was going to go in there and give Boots the fight of his life, but that wasn't the case. And the other thing I forgot to mention in the prediction episode was that Stanionis hasn't been in the ring in over 330 days. And so you might need to think like ring rust has something to do with it. You know, maybe, obviously having a child that I don't, that might have been in the back of his mind, which maybe might have been a reason why it got stopped in the sixth round. No, I'm not gonna lie to you. I was pretty shocked that the corner waved it off. I thought after he survived the sixth round, I thought he was gonna come back out for the seventh, but I guess not. Overall, they waved it off. They probably thought about his health first, and Boots ended up winning the fight. Now, as far as Stanionis, what did Stanionis do well? Well, Stanionis, I will say this. He wasn't really a dominant body puncher. However, there were some moments he did land that right hook a decent amount, and especially the left hook. You see, I always said it's going to take a southpaw fighter to beat Jaron Boots Ennis, and after this performance, I think that confirms what I've said. See, A lot of y'all will be pointing to Brian Norman, but in my opinion, it's gonna take a southpaw. So for me, the right hook was landing and the left hook was landing for Stanionis. Whenever he picked his moments and he picked them correctly, the hook was a the hook was a big shot that was landing. It was definitely affecting. He also, when he would go to the body, it was effective as well. But the problem was Stanionis was very cautious to go to the body. He had moments to do it. I mean, he was the shorter fighter, and there were a lot of moments he had a chance to get into the inside. He was in the inside, and he just never pulled the trigger with the body shots. The other thing, he did it a little bit, but he really wasn't that aggressive on the inside. The only time I really saw him show any aggressiveness on the inside was when he was in the clinch. And overall, to me, that just wasn't going to be enough to win the fight. Now, the weaknesses what really ended up bothering Stanionis. Like I said, his body was the target. That was evident because that's what started the whole knockdown in round six. Then you got the jab. The jab was just landing all night long. Jaron Boots Ennis was having a field day with that jab. You talk about the counter right. The counter right, like if you really go and look at it, he ended up backing up Stanionis. He hit him with a right hook, but the counter right was hitting. The counter lefts were hitting. The uppercuts were going. I mean, overall, Jaron Boots Ennis was just on fire. Like he was hitting on all cylinders. And then last but not least, he left his head on the line when he was doing throwing combinations. And I want to point to one moment in the fight. So in round five, Stanionis had momentum. And Jaron Boots Ennis just took it back. He had momentum in round five. And then later on in that round, Boots realized like he had to pick up the pace. He had to put his foot on the gas. And that was one thing that I said about Boots that might have been a weakness was sometimes he lets his foot off the gas. And in that round, he was letting his foot off the gas. But the thing is with Boots, the difference was he put his foot back on the gas and he picked it back up. See, Jaron Boots Ennis, he wasn't going to allow Stanionis to take that round. Stanionis was winning that round. He would have had round five. And then later in that round, Jaron Boots Ennis just flipped the switch and he became the aggressor. He became the most dominant fighter in that round. And Stanionis ended up taking a backseat. He ended up backpedaling, and he ended up being on defensive mode when he was on offense for the entire round. And if it wasn't for that moment, Stanionis may have took the fifth round. Who knows? Maybe he gains some momentum. Maybe he starts getting Jaron Boots Ennis to think. But Jaron Boots Ennis, knowing that he's a champion, knowing that not only he has to defend his IBF title, but he has to go for the WBA belt, he realized that he's got to push the pace. He's got to pressure him, and he's got to make sure that Stanionis knows that he is the best fighter in that ring. So for me, as far as strategy, Jaron Boots Ennis had a great strategy. Stanionis, I think the strategy was kind of poor. I'm not going to lie to you. So overall strategy for both fighters, I got to give it a seven. I have to give it a seven. So that's where I'm going to put it. I'm going to give it a seven. Now, as far as the excitement in that fight, I'm not gonna lie to you, it was a decently exciting fight. I will say this, towards the later on, towards like the fourth, fifth, and sixth round, it started getting a little bit more exciting. Jaron Boots Ennis started to kind of showboat a little bit. He started to kind of, have a lot more fun in there. Like he said, he was getting into his bag, he was getting a rhythm, and he was overall just enjoying his time in the ring when he started getting a lot more comfortable. And that was and to me, that was one of the weaknesses I took for Jaron Boots Ennis. Sometimes he kind of gets like that. He kind of takes the fight lightly. But in this fight, when he took the fight, when he was kind of moving around, dancing a little bit, when he was basically kind of showboating, it was because Stanionis didn't have an answer for him. And in my opinion, there's going to be some guys that he can't do that in the ring with. I don't think he's going to be able to pull that off against Virgil Ortiz or somebody like Brian Norman. Overall, there's gonna be some guys that he just can't pull that off with. But in this fight, he was able to do it because he was dominating Stanionis so much. So it was an exciting fight. And for me, overall, as far as excitement, I gotta give that a seven as well. See, both of these guys, they had their moments, and even though Stanionis really did take a beating in there, he had his moments where he would clip Jaron Boots Ennis. There was a moment in the fight where Jaron Boots Ennis was on the canvas, but because he hit the back of his head, they didn't count it as a knockdown, which is the right call. But overall, both these guys, they showed a very, very exciting fight. And they went out there and they put on a good fight. So overall, I can't hate. As a matter of fact, you know what? I'm gonna give it a 7.5. 7.5 out of 10 as far as excitement, that will be my grade. Now, let's talk about the hype. Let's talk about all that. So, as far as the hype of this fight, there really wasn't a lot of buzz. Obviously, Matchroom was promoting it, and overall they did an okay job with that. but there really wasn't no like trash talking. There weren't no moments, you know. I mean, overall, there really wasn't a big hype to this fight. Now, after this fight is where the hype starts coming in because everybody who said that Jaron Boots Ennis is only fighting C-class fighters, his resume is soft. He's not, he might not be ready for the big competition. Well, let me tell you something. They're gonna have to reconsider that opinion because I know what the excuse is gonna be. Well, Stanionis really didn't fight nobody, and he never earned that belt. He basically was given that belt just like Boots. I already know what the excuse is gonna be. The counter argument to that is, regardless, you got to unify the division. That was the goal. He wanted to fight champions. He wanted to beat champions. Well, guess what? You got two champions on your resume now. Now you got the Ring Magazine belt, the IBF belt, and the WBA belt. So you got three belts in the welterweight division. So the truth is, regardless of what you think about Stanionis, again, 2016 Olympian, undefeated. He was 15-0, now 15-1, and you went in there and you beat him in the sixth round. Brian Norman had a very, very dominant performance against Cuevas. Well, guess what? Cuevas wasn't even a champion. Stanionis was, and Jaron Boots Ennis went in there against Stanionis and dominated him. So now all of a sudden, everybody who was saying he's not ready for Brian Norman, they got to reconsider that opinion as well. Now, some people's opinions might not change. Some people might think Brian Norman still would best Jaron Boots Ennis, but overall, you got to really look at that fight that just happened between Ennis and Stanionis. And now you got to really ask the question: is Stanionis the best welterweight in this division? In my opinion, the answer is yes. When you have the Ring Magazine belt, when you have the other two out of four major belts in that division, of course you're the best champion in that division. Why wouldn't you be? So as far as the hype around this fight, you're gonna see a lot of people start swaying towards Jaron Boots Ennis. And you're gonna see a lot of haters start rising up and saying, "Oh, he's still not ready for this guy. He should have moved up to 154. He's ducking Virgil Ortiz." There's gonna be a lot of excuses. There's gonna be a lot of talk. But overall, I'm gonna say this right now. If I had this grade the hype, honestly, it wasn't hyped for the before, but after this fight, if we're really talking about that, you could make an argument that he is in the top 10 pound for pound. That he should have a solidified spot there. I would put him at number 9. I mean, we're giving the spots to Devin Haney and Earl Spence Jr. Earl Spence just got last time he fought was over a year ago. He got dominated by Terrence Crawford. Then you give it to somebody like Devin Haney. He hasn't fought in a year, and when he did fight, he originally lost to Ryan Garcia, and then the whole steroid thing happened. I'd give him like the ninth or the eighth spot. I think Jaron Boots Ennis earns it. So overall, for me, hype, I'm gonna give it a 7.5. And then last but not least, impact. Well, how does this impact the division or boxing? Well, like I said, for the impact, now you got to put him in the top 10 pound for pound, in my opinion. And as far as the division, well, he already said he wanted to fight all the best. Now, after the Trukajan fight and after the Avanesian fight, he needs to go after another champion. Now, I understand some people might say he's not always going to fight champions. Some people are going to get tune-up fights. I don't need to see another tune-up fight with Jaron Boots Ennis. While his stock is high, you need to keep on raising it. If he ends up getting a win against Stanionis, and then the next thing you know, he's fighting somebody else at 147 who doesn't have any hype around him, it's not going to be worth it. Nobody's going to want to see it. So in my opinion, you're going to have to give him another champion. You're going to have to make something work, So overall, I will say, like, after this fight, the impact is pretty big because now all of a sudden you put Jaron Boots Ennis in situations where he can get bigger fights, where he can start fighting B fighters or B class fighters or A class fighters. He can start fighting champions, and I don't know who he's going to target. I don't know who Eddie Hearn is going to target. But overall, regardless of whether it's him staying at 147 or moving up to 154, I do believe that it's time to give Jaron Boots Ennis another champion. He needs to have another champion on his resume. Not a former champion, not somebody who used to challenge for the belt 5, 6 years ago. We're talking about a current champion right now or a legitimate contender. So for me, as far as impact, I believe you have all the tools to do it. And I believe he will be in the pound for pound. So as far as impact, I'm going to give it a 7. And with that being said, the overall score for this fight is 7.25. Now, as far as the rankings that we have so far, where do we put that? Well, 7.25 is going to be right under Oshaki, Foster, and Robeson Casaccio, and it's going to be right above Lauren Price and Bexy Mateus. So it's not going to be in our top 10. But overall, I do believe that the fight, it was dominant. It was one-sided. Um, I do believe that the hype wasn't really around it, and after this fight, there's going to be a lot of hype. But overall, I think the thing that really knocks it is the impact because we don't know what type of impact it's going to have. We don't know if they're going to slate Jaron Boots Ennis from the top 10 pound for pound list, and we don't know what fight we're going to get next. So I think that really slated it. Overall, if you're at when I go back and look at this, I feel like it should have a higher place on these rankings, but 7.25 is where it is, right between Oshaki Foster and Robeson Casaccio and Lauren Price and Bexy Mateus. So with that being said, now here is the big question. Well, what's next for Jaron Boots Ennis? It's really tough, man, because the other two champions you have to get, you got Mario Barrios. I mean, Mario Barrios, I have a feeling he might be willing to make a fight with Matchroom. So I'm not gonna basically X that out of the book. Brian Norman getting a fight with Top Rank, it's gonna be really, really hard. I know whenever Matchroom and Top Rank do collide, they always come up with some banger events. And I would like to see that fight because I think it would be another banger event between Matchroom and Top Rank. But it's just really hard to kind of set up a fight with Bob Arum in Top Rank when you're not part of Top Rank. In my opinion, here's what I would do. I say the easiest fight to make, and it would be a good fight to watch, would be Jaron Boots Ennis going up to 154. And there's a guy that's a 154 pounder, former champion, who just fought Virgil Ortiz, gave him a decent fight. He lost, unfortunately, but I think it would be a good test. And it would be a good fight to test Jaron Boots Ennis before actually challenging for a belt at 154. I would say Boots versus Israel Madrimov. That to me is a great fight because Israel Madrimov's already part of Matchroom, so Eddie Hearn can make that fight happen. It's a Matchroom fighter versus a Matchroom fighter. Either way, he gets a big deal out of it. Israel Madrimov, whether win or loss, he lost to Terrence Crawford, but he put up a great fight. He lost to Virgil Ortiz, but he put up a good fight. So, in my opinion, when you put those two up against each other, Matchroom is going to have a great event on their hand, and on top of that, it's going to really help Boots stock. It's really going to help Israel Madrimov build his resume. And overall, it puts another champion on Boots' record. He goes up to 154. He looks a little big for 147, so I do think will bump up to 154 if I had to take a guess. But I feel like that's the easiest fight to make. The fight that I would personally want to see, though, him and Virgil would be really great. But if we're looking at that 154 division, I think you would need a tune up first. But in my opinion, I got to see Bakr and Murtazaliyev back in the ring. I need to see Murtazaliyev versus Boots Ennis. To me, that is a good fight because Boots is a different style that I don't think Murtazaliyev has seen, and Murtazaliyev is a different power that I don't think Boots has seen. And after seeing what Murtazaliyev did with Tim Tszyu, I really want to see him versus Boots. To me, that would be the biggest fight. Murtazaliyev is a champion at 154, and overall, if Boots could go in there against Murtazaliyev and do maybe what he did against Stanionis or have a good outing, we're talking about a two-division champion. We're talking about Boots being easily somewhere. You got an argument to say Boots is going to be in that top 5 pound for pound if he beats Murtaza Aliyev. So for me, that's what I would love to see. That's the biggest fight for me to see. Obviously, people are going to say him and Terrence Crawford. I would love to see that. I just can't see it happening. With the rate that Terrence Crawford fights at, I just really can't see Crawford versus Boots. It would be a great fight to see. I would love to see that fight, but overall, him and Murtaza Aliyev would be a banger, in my opinion. Or maybe if Earl Spence is looking to come back, you put Boots versus Earl Spence. So many fights you can make with Boots, depending on what he's gonna do. But the main decision is gonna be for Boots, whether he stays at 147, tries to unify more belts, or even become undisputed, or he goes up to 154. Overall, we just got to wait and see what happens. But regardless, congratulations to Jaron Boots Ennis on unifying the IBF and the WBA belt, along with being Ring Magazine champion. As far as Stanionis, again, I wish him and his family nothing but blessings as they expect the birth of their child. And overall, I feel like Stanionis will be back. It's going to be kind of a hard mountain to climb to get back to being a champion in that division, but I believe he can do it. I believe you play your cards right, you get the right fights. I believe maybe him and Barrios could go at it. But overall, this was obviously Jaron Boots' night. Obviously, you want to talk about Boots. Well, he put Boots to asses tonight. And I mean, honestly, it's time for people to really start acknowledging Jaron Boots Ennis as not only the number one welterweight in the division, but a top 10 pound for pound fighter. And that's the statement that I want to end this video on. But before we end this video, again, make sure y'all tune into the other content that we got, the other videos that we got. Make sure y'all go take a look at the prediction episode. Let me know how I did with that. Let me know the comparisons, all that type of stuff. I got the prediction wrong. I thought it was going to be a unanimous decision. It wasn't. It was a knockout in the sixth round. I didn't think it was going to happen that early. But overall, regardless, make sure y'all take a look at that prediction episode. Let me know how I did. Make sure y'all take a look at the other episodes that I had before that, the reels, the social medias, the podcasts, all these types of things, Reddit reviews. We got so much content for the Puncher's Point. We got so much boxing content that y'all are not going to want to miss out on. So with that being said, I wish y'all a good night and make sure y'all stay on point with the Puncher's Point.